He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday and Friday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content such as interviews and D&D campaigns at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and I just wanted to take a quick second to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, as in Canada, it is Thanksgiving Day today on our Monday. So across the provinces, I hope you're all having a great time with friends, family, good food, and all that. I know I am. You're full of turkey. I love it. It's fantastic, but I digress. So I wanted to get into the Harrison Hot Springs. Now, I alluded to this in the previous episode, Campfire Clues, where I went, visited, and got to learn a lot about just Bigfoot. So let's get into this. Now, about 32 kilometers north of Chilliwack, British Columbia, lies the semi-small town of Harrison Hot Springs. Population 1,632. Labeled as the Bigfoot capital of the world, if you're in the area and a fan of this hairy hominid, I highly recommend stopping in and checking out the sites, hiking trails, and especially the Bigfoot Museum. They are currently in a smaller building of the visitor center, but come 2023, the museum will be reopening in a newly constructed building, but 3 times the size of its previous location, and the museum just will be expanded beyond that, which is fantastic. But before I get too far into that, couple of plugs. Be sure to check us out on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, as well as our Patreon, where you get ad-free early episodes. And if you want to say hi or reach out to us, you can email our way at cryptidclues@gmail.com. Now, be sure to check out the main feeds for our recently released Part 2 preview of Haunt of the Grassman. Full episode is on Patreon. In our previous episode that I mentioned again, that was focusing more on the Bigfoot encounters that were coming out of Harrison Hot Springs. Now, I mentioned the website, CryptidClues.ca. We have a blog that's posted up there that has a whole bunch of content from our previous episodes. And this episode has a lot of photos and additional information that's attached to these photos. And all that is going to be available on our website. I'm going to put the link in the description below. So everything that I talk about, you'll be able to see the corresponding photos attached. It just makes it a little bit more interactive and gives you guys that visual representation. So yeah, let's get into this. So looking back, Harrison Hot Springs. This area has been subject to countless sightings over the course of the last 200 years, all with documented reports via word of mouth and newspaper clippings. Now, the museum itself has a ton of awesome components to catch your eye, including several foot castings, again, that I photographed, and it'll be in the blog. But to start with this first foot casting, now there is photo attached. It's the Bossberg Cripplefoot tracks, 1969. Now, these tracks were found on November 24th and showcase what appears to be a crippled-looking right foot. These were located near the Bossberg town dump. Reports came into the police that year prior of a Sasquatch nearby. Whether it was the same Sasquatch is not confirmed, but locals had taken to calling this injured Bigfoot the Cripplefoot, or the Bossberg Cripple. On November 27th, a Bigfoot searcher by the name of Rene Dahinden appeared at the site to investigate. But the tracks were since gone from, unfortunately, tourists walking about and kind of that phrase, contaminate the area, crime scene kind of thing. Rene was, however, able to cast and photograph the best prints and keep them still intact. However, another searcher by the name of Bob Titmus also joined Rene in this hunt. And after about 2 weeks of just constant exploration, Rene and local Bossberg resident Ivan Marks managed to acquire it. On December 13th, 1969, they found giant human-like tracks in the snow leading from across a river near Lake Roosevelt. And once these were found, anthropologist Grover Krantz joined the group and took the photos, made castings, all of which were studied by a primatologist, John Napier, and anthropologist, Jeff Meldrum. Both scientists became convinced and confirmed the track's authenticity. The Bosberg cripple's foot deformity was due to the congenital condition that we call metatarsus adductus, or skew foot, basically. Metatarsus adductus refers to a condition where the metatarsal bones are turned toward the middle of the body. This causes that visible deformity like you can see apparent in the casting, where the foot is kind of like arced around, like inwards a little bit. But moving on from that, the next casting is of the Terrace Sasquatch foot cast. This was 1974, photo attached. At this point in time, the new highway bridge into Terrace had finally reached a point of its construction where it was deemed safe for the public to access after construction working hours had ceased. Taking advantage of this time frame, there were two friends who made the trek to cross over to Ferry Island from Terrace and just go and explore the area. Now, on the riverbank, they ended up finding large, fresh footprints, and this yielded an immediate return back to town. They went and got the supplies, the plaster, a camera, and after they made a bunch of castings and photographs, they explored the area to find the creature, but unfortunately they were not able to find anything, or maybe fortunately in their case, they weren't able to cite anything though. Our third casting. Now this one was taken from Merritt, British Columbia in 2016 and was submitted by Thomas Steenberg. Cheryl Douglas and her grandson, Hunter Pollard, who was age 12 at the time, they basically stumbled upon it along the bank of Coldwater River in Merritt. Mrs. Douglas had made the casting and then gave it to Thomas Steenberg. And now we have the Grayson's Harbor Harry Ford Bigfoot casts. This is April 22nd, 1982. Now, having been collected in that year by Deputy Dennis Harry Ford of the Grayson's Harbor County Sheriff's Department in Washington State, that is a mouthful. These two tracks are regarded as some of the best casts ever made, especially because of the officer's position and credibility. But looking at the specifics of the casting, we can see the mushrooming of the toes, and that is actually a very difficult thing to hoax. The texture, the bulging features shown in these tracks also demonstrates that these were created by a very real foot instead of that wooden practical effect. Again, like I mentioned before, the credibility coming from someone who works in government, that adds a lot more weight behind this account. Moving on to our next casting, again, as seen as our website's blog post, is the Bluff Creek cast of 1958. Now in California, a gentleman named Jerry Crew casted a footprint at 17.5 inches long. Now this cast, it's worth noting, is a replica of the original casting that was taken to newspaper back in the day. That newspaper had gone and ran with an article that this is what really garnered much attention to the term Bigfoot. And I attached a image here of the article just so you can kind of get that reference there. And up next to conclude the display case pieces of Sasquatch foot castings, we have the Chilliwack River foot cast, dated August 1986. While passing through Chilliwack from the town of Hope, researcher Thomas Steenberg, who we mentioned earlier, learned of a sighting up near the Chilliwack River called Cows Creek. When he arrived at the campsite, he interviewed the two Americans that witnessed the creature, and the couple was fishing, and eventually throughout their day, they saw an 8-foot-tall man-like hairy creature removing the trout from their cache. Thomas explored the scene and managed to pick up the cryptid's trail in a creek bed, and from the creek bed, he was actually able to extract 2 impressions. Whilst the first one didn't take, he was successful with the second one. Now, just like we discussed before, there is more to Bluff Creek than the Jerry Crew casting. The attached photos in the blog here of these other foot castings are from the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot that also occurred in Bluff Creek, California, October 20th, 1967. That famous footage is also attached here for your convenience in the blog to view, just in case, because there are individuals out there who may not have seen this footage. There's people that I speak to all the time that don't know the Sierra sounds either, so definitely Google them, please. But before we continue on, I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break, and then we'll be right back. And we're back. So my next favorite part of the Harrison Hot Springs Bigfoot Museum is the massive map that they have on the wall with a plethora of numbered locations that reference specific sightings. So I tried to take a photo of the map and it didn't turn out very well. So I've recreated this map with an up-to-date account of more recent local sightings. And again, this map you can see on our blog on our website. Now I'm actually going to recount some of these sightings that were listed in the museum that correspond to the map locations. Our first one, location Ruby Creek, date October 1941. Jeanne Chapman and children see a large hair-covered creature approaching their house while walking on two legs. Large footprints in the soil were left behind, as well as a broken barrel of salted salmon that had been partially eaten and strewn across the ground. This occasion marked the first time that a law enforcement officer from the US had come into Canada to investigate a reported Sasquatch incident. And again, number one, you can see on our blog, reference number one on the map. Number two, location Ruby Creek, date August 1973. Ralph Bob sights a hair-covered creature along the road near the Ruby Creek Bridge at 1 a.m. as Ralph and family were returning from a drive-in movie in Chilliwack, British Columbia. Number 3. Location, Silver River. Date, August 1939. Prospector Burns Yeomans spots 4 dark-haired covered creatures in a valley off the headwaters of Silver River. Burns said the creatures appeared to be playing or wrestling. 4. Location, Silver River. Date, 1988. Joseph Verhoeven spots a large reddish-brown hair-covered man-like creature around 4 o'clock in the afternoon while picking berries near the mouth of Silver River. 5. Location, Hornet Creek Road. Date, March 30th, 1993. Joseph Verhoeven witnesses a reddish brown-haired creature eating devil's club roots around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So about 5 years later, our same individual from number 4 had another experience somewhere else in this vicinity, but still it's crazy that we get 2 encounters like that. 6. Location, Block 3 FSR. Date, September 2006. Bear hunter Paul Teeler finds footprints along the Forest Service Road. Block 3 FSR is the name of the Forest Service Road above Harrison Lake. 7. Location, Morris Lake. Date, February 1994. Unnamed source reported tracks found along the shore of Harrison Lake. Now, Harrison Lake, definitely look at some maps of this because the lake is huge. It's massive, and you're still so close to the coast a little bit that you could be fooled for it being ocean, but it's all like really, really nice cold glacier water that kind of pools into the lake, so it's a beautiful spot. 8. Location, Chehalis Flat. Date, March 2006. Thomas Steenberg and Sebastian Wang find large bear footprints on the flats near a waterhole. 9. Location, Morris Valley. Date, 1900. C.H. Old Sr. finds large foot tracks on a sandbar in Morris Valley. 10. Location, Harrison Mills. Date, 1948. Henry Charlie reported that a Sasquatch, while riding his bike on Morris Valley Road, chased him. Henry reported that as he was looking back at the creature, that it appeared to all of a sudden lose interest in him and then veered off into the bush, not to be seen by Henry again. 11. Location, Harrison Hot Springs. Date, July 1958. Rick Hedberg reports that around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he and his brother saw a Sasquatch near a tree while out hiking. The creature was grayish brown in color and appeared to be 7 feet tall. 12. Location, Harrison Hot Springs. Date, April 2nd, 1970. Vancouver man claims to have almost hit a large hair-covered creature that was crossing Hot Springs Road. The creature was said to be covered in dark hair, stood about 8 feet tall, and appeared to be very heavy. 13. Location, Agassiz. Date, 1940. Local farmer finds large footprints in snow on his farm. The farmer was said to have followed the tracks up the slope of a nearby mountain where he decided not to go any further before returning home. I have to wonder what it was that made him choose to go back home. If it was the conditions, the terrain, or maybe something occurred that he just didn't feel comfortable disclosing. 14. Location, Sasquatch Provincial Park. Date, August 16th, 1994. New Westminster man Peter Jasmine claims to have found large 15.5-inch footprints near his site number 12 at Deer Lake Campground. And lastly, number 15. Location, Bench Campground. Date, August 1994. Unnamed witness claims to have seen a Sasquatch that caused campers to leave the park. That one sends shivers down my spine. Just think, you can only imagine what the Sasquatch is doing to cause people to be leaving. And I've heard other accounts where people have just arrived and then got the heck out of there all in the same night because it's really unfriendly interactions that are occurring. But I digress. So there is a plethora, of course, of other sightings noted on the map, but I'll be diving into those into another episode. Now, I wanted to touch back onto the museum here. Now, they hold a booklet containing old newspaper clippings that are associated with Sasquatch, and there's a great amount of merchandise available for purchase. I did end up picking Reuben a souvenir, a book that's called In Search of Giants, and it's actually written by Thomas Steenberg. And I picked up a book for myself called Who's Watching You by Linda Coyle-Sucky. Both are filled with great amounts of information. Additionally, they also had free stickers, so I swiped a couple of those for myself too, and one for Reuben. The curator at this museum, doubling also as the visitor center host, was full of Sasquatch information, taking note of a variety of encounters that walk-ins report. And while visiting, I was subject to the intriguing conversation actually of two individuals debating the existence of Sasquatch. And it made me realize in my position that I haven't ever been caught in such a debacle myself. Often it's more lighthearted, humor conversations with my friends and even family members, but my same grounding perspective is applied nonetheless. I would say that once you engage in the mass collective of sightings and casts, you'll realize that these things do indeed share a sense of realism and sometimes relation within our own world. Hopefully that makes sense. I just found it interesting how when they were talking, hearing how they were defending and then insisting both like the existence and the non-existence of this creature, going about finding the evidence. So it was interesting to hear that from another perspective. But like I had mentioned at the start, this place is definitely worth inquiring and visiting should you have the chance. Now, if you happen to venture across the ocean towards Vancouver Island, I highly recommend visiting the Horn Lake Caves. Not for any Bigfoot sightings or any cryptid mysteries hiding about, but purely for the educational purposes and just the good experience as it was. As our tour guide did prove very informative on the subject matter, and I personally love a good cave system. But all in all, though, I learned that Vancouver Island holds over 3,000 cave systems, but roughly 1,800 of these caves have officially been discovered so far. Our caving guide had even found a cave system ranging 3,000 meters long, which is roughly 1.8 miles underground. Additionally, if you're looking and trying to hunt for caves, 1 in 9 sinkholes, which is just the sink area of the ground, not necessarily like a sinkhole out in the wilderness of the Amazon, but chances are it's a cave system. And you can find, maybe if you're lucky, find that entrance nearby. Now, most caves you can find signs of wildlife in, and many of these caves don't house anything. These ones that we went to did have gates that were set up that were reinforced by lock, so people and animals alike couldn't get in there. There's a lot of unfortunate vandalisms that people did to some of these areas of the caves, which is unfortunate, but they go very deep underground. Of course, they aren't connected to any long paths with openings up in other places necessarily. It's just kind of like loops deep underground in this mountain base. But I don't dismiss that as evidence enough why Bigfoot may not travel using caves in general. Most of these networks, like I said, may just go to an absolute dead end, or some may have undiscovered access points to other areas. I'm sure Bigfoot is definitely smart enough to think, okay, if these ones are being tourist locations, we're not going to use these. We're going to just stick to our own. Now, that's possibly too optimistic, but in the end, after exploring these caves, the amount of access points that could exist, oh my gosh, the levels upon levels just blows my mind. Not to mention the freshwater factor. Now, the guide did go and mention that food is definitely scarce. Like, you're not going to be able to really sustain yourself if you were to live down there permanently. But you got to take into account venturing above ground, grabbing things. And I'm going to reference a very creepy horror movie, The Descent. And I know that that's not necessarily based on any realistic factors, but those things come out at night. They go above ground, kill a deer, bring the deer back underground. It works. Now, what I wanted to get into with this about the water is we came to a light waterfall underground that was producing fresh water that is filtered through the limestone, and we were able to drink it, no problem. I'm still standing here. It's been a few weeks now since I was able to taste it. It tasted fantastic, way better than tap water, I can tell you that. Naturally filtrated. So y'all, there you go. You have a water source for something to reside in. And if these national parks are all associated with glaciers and with amazingly beautiful mountain ranges, imagine if these cave systems, and I'm getting into it, everyone. You have these underground highways going through and connecting from point A to point B, having natural water flow in that you could just drink as you're going along. I mean, you're set. What do you got to worry about? Dragging in food, you got fresh water. I mean, it's fantastic. All in all, it was just a great trip, and I learned a fair amount about our province that isn't as easily accessible in the interwebs of Google and other online sources. It felt good to conduct this boots on the ground research, and I hope to continue this sort of work moving forward. My goal is to get Reuben out here. We're going to revisit this museum when they reopen in their new location, being larger and expanded. And I also want to really thoroughly enjoy a lot of the hiking trails. And I've attached an image here of one of these trails that we ventured on. The location was beautiful, and while I was kind of like snooping around on the ground a little bit trying to see if maybe I might find a print or something, definitely did not. I imagine that while some of these occurrences and sightings have happened relatively close, I do think that a lot of these things that are taking place are now pushed a little bit more north, not closer towards that national park that's a little bit higher up, but just more north into the wooded areas. When you're standing on the beach of Harrison Hot Springs and you look out, it's just incredible when you're standing in this part of town and literally the mountain ranges going on and on and on. And this is what I reiterated to my wife as she was there with me. Like, we don't think of the world like this. We're all so close-knit along the border of Canada and the United States with our big cities and our massive hubs of residents, where when you go out into this terrain, oh my goodness, all throughout driving around Harrison and looking at these trails, you walk 10 feet off to the side into the bush, you're gone. No one's going to see you. So something's hiding out there, which I guarantee some of these are. I mean, they have a playground to work with. They are easily avoiding us and for some reason showing us themselves for the odd occasional sighting. But I digress. That is all the time that I have for today's episode. I will be back with another weekly episode detailing into those newspaper clippings that I reviewed in the museum. Some of them go back really, really old, and it was fascinating. And again, if you're looking for other newspaper-focused episodes, we have them covering UFOs, Dogman, and Bigfoot on our main feeds. And remember, you can also find blog access and show notes available on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, as well as our Patreon, where you get ad-free early episodes available there. And should you want to say hi or reach out to us, you can do so via our email at CryptidClues@gmail.com. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Take care and stay safe.